You're not getting a raise, the new director announced. And your annual bonus. Consider it canceled for attitude. The room laughed. I just nodded. 3 days later, our $400 million partner froze all payments. Their lawyer sent one line. Patent number 40. 312 belongs to him, not you. The CEO dropped his phone. The air in the conference room was thick with the scent of ambition and stale coffee. The kind that tasted like battery acid filtered through a gym sock. It was 9 o'clock in the morning on a Tuesday, and the Minneapolis sky outside the oversized windows looked like a bruised sheet of aluminum. I was sitting in my usual spot, the back corner, away from the sunlight, away from the glossy mahogany table where the visionary sat. I'm Mike. I'm 40, 5 years old, Boda, and I've been a senior patents and compliance specialist at this company for 12 years. Boda, I I have the face that people forget 5 seconds after they look at it, and a job title boring enough to induce comas at cocktail parties. But I was, and often am, the reason this company hadn't been sued into a smoking crater in the ground. We were in the middle of the quarterly strategic planning session. At the head of the table sat Daniel West. Daniel was our new director of innovation, a man who looked like he was manufactured in a lab funded by LinkedIn and hair gel. He was 32, wore suits that were a little too tight, and used words like synergy, paradigm, Boda, and ideation as if they possessed mystical power. He had been with the company for 3 months. I had been here for a dozen years. Boda. He was making 3 times my salary to point at a PowerPoint presentation that I had essentially written for him. We are looking at a quantum leap in revenue, Daniel announced, slapping the whiteboard with the back of his hand. Boda. He had the restless energy of a golden retriever that had just ingested a bag of espresso beans. With the roll out of the Gemini X module, Boda, our partnership with Titan Corp is going to scale vertically. We are talking about a $400 million valuation shift, people. This is the big leagues, and the intellectual property is fully locked down. That's when my left eye gave a micro twitch, a tiny, almost imperceptible spasm of professional annoyance. I cleared my throat. It was a dry, quiet sound, but in the acoustic vacuum of the boardroom, it felt like a disruptive crack. Daniel? I said, keeping my voice level, the voice of pure reason. Just a point of clarification on the intellectual property lockdown. Daniel stopped mid-gesture. Boda. He looked at me like I was a printer that had just jammed, a piece of old, functional equipment refusing to perform its duty. Mike, we are in a flow state here. Can we park the details in the lot? It's not a detail, I said, adjusting my glasses on the bridge of my nose. You listed the Gemini X neural architecture as wholly owned proprietary assets, but the underlying optimization algorithm, patent number 40, 312, has a pending flag in the internal audit system. It's not fully assigned to the legacy ledger yet. The room went quiet, the kind of silence that happens right before a crash. The CEO, Boda, a man named Robert Hayes, who had the ethical backbone of a chocolate eclair left on a dashboard in July, looked up from his phone with a faint, annoyed frown. Mike. Daniel sighed, a sound of exaggerated patience that dripped with condescension. You've been over this. Legal said we're good. Titan Corp is ready to sign. Stop trying to find problems where there are only solutions. You're killing the vibe. Mike's internal conflict, his urge to retreat and avoid personal conflict, was momentarily overcome by the sheer, blunt threat to the company's legal standing. He knew this level of reckless arrogance was going to cost them everything, and he had to try one last time to fix it to fulfill his purpose. I'm not trying to kill the vibe, Daniel. I insisted, my voice gaining a terrible, low steadiness. I'm trying to keep us from committing contract fraud. Patent number 4312 is the structural load bearing wall of that entire deal. If the assignment chain isn't clean, Titan Corp can freeze the contract. The warning was clear, delivered without emotion. Daniel laughed. It wasn't a genuine laugh, but the sharp, dismissive bark of a man used to getting his way. He looked around the mahogany table, inviting the others to join in his mockery. A few of the junior vice presidents chuckled nervously, Boda, eager to align themselves with the new alpha dog. They were always eager to align with the person who could authorize their next career bump. Mike's final, factual warning about the 4312 patent was already a distant, bothersome echo to them. This is exactly what I'm talking about, Daniel said, turning his back to me, addressing the room, not me. Old school thinking, obstructionist. We are a rocket ship, Mike. You are trying to check the tire pressure while we are breaking the atmosphere. I felt the heat rise up my neck. But it wasn't the heat of shame. It was the cold, hard, bada, familiar anger of a person who knows exactly how the machine works, being lectured by a child who just likes pushing the buttons, Boda. For 12 years, I had been the silent custodian of this place. I had missed my niece's baptism for this company. I had worked through the flu, through my divorce, through the death of my mother, making sure their patents were filed, their compliance audits were clean, and their collective corporate backside was covered. That dedication, that sacrifice, was now being called obstructionist. The belief that my value was derived from my utility, from fixing their problems, was being crushed. The meeting dragged on for another hour. I didn't speak again. I just took notes, detailed, time-stamped notes. I wrote down every promise Daniel made, every risk he waved away, every regulation he called optional guidance. I recorded the meeting's runtime on my notepad, 1 hour and 23 minutes of highly paid nonsense. My emotional arc, which typically defaulted to quiet avoidance, was shifting. It was a cold, calculated shift toward gathering data, toward documentation, toward something far more dangerous than yelling. At the end of the meeting, as people were shuffling their papers and checking their smartwatches, Daniel clapped his hands sharply. One last thing. He announced, the sound bouncing off the glass walls. Housekeeping. He turned his gaze directly to me. There was a glint in his eye, a malicious, small sparkle. He wasn't just annoyed by my interruption earlier, he was offended by my existence. I was a relic of the old regime, a speed bump on his highway to the C-suite. I was a mirror showing him the messy reality of the law, a reality he preferred to ignore. We've been reviewing the discretionary budget for the end of year bonuses. Daniel continued, his voice loud enough to carry into the hallway. Boda. And we've decided to pivot our compensation strategy to reward growth mindsets. He paused, allowing the implication to hang in the air like a noxious gas. Unfortunately, Mike, to Sabota, based on your performance today and the general attitude of resistance you've displayed this quarter, I'm canceling your annual raise. And the bonus? Consider it off the table, too. The silence that followed was different from the earlier silence. This wasn't awkward, Boda. It was horrified, publicly stripping a senior employee of their bonus in front of the entire executive team. It was a power move so aggressive it bordered on sociopathic, it was meant to destroy me. We need team players. Daniel continued, flashing a smile that didn't reach his dead, shark-like eyes. Not anchors. Maybe this will motivate you to get on board with the vision. Robert Hayes, the CEO, didn't say a word. He just looked down at his notepad, tracing a circle over and over again with his pen, the symbol of his inaction. I felt the blood drain from my face. My hands, resting on my notebook, went numb. 12 years. The years I had poured into this place. The sacrifices of my personal life, all because I believed my dedication would translate to value and security. And this man, the Sabota, this tailored suit filled with sawdust and arrogance, was stripping it all away because I dared to correct him on a filing error. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I didn't flip the mahogany table. That's what they expected. They expected the emotional reaction. They expected me to break. Instead, I stood up. I capped my pen with a decisive click, a sound that felt deafening in the silence. I gathered my notebook and my tablet. Understood, I said. My voice was steady. Terrifyingly steady. Daniel blinked. Disappointed he didn't get a tearful scene. Good. Glad we're clear, he said, dismissive again. Crystal? I replied. Bada. I walked out of the conference room, my heels clicking a rhythmic beat on the gray industrial carpet. Click, click, click. It sounded like a countdown. They thought they had broken me. They thought they had put the quiet compliance guy in his place. Sabota. I could hear their nervous relief when the door closed. What they didn't know, what Daniel in his infinite arrogance hadn't bothered to check, Boda. And what Robert was too checked out to remember was the specific history of patent number 4312. Daniel was right about one thing. It was the backbone of the $400 million deal. But he was wrong about who owned it. He thought it was a company asset. I knew for a fact it wasn't, because I wrote it. Boda. And I knew exactly where the bodies were buried, because I was the one holding the shovel. The shift from avoidance was complete. The conflict was now personal, cold, and strategic. I walked out of the conference room and headed toward the compliance annex, which is corporate speak for the dark, low-ceilinged corner near the server room where we put the people who actually do work. It hummed with the white noise of cooling fans and the faint ozone smell of overheating electronics. I liked it here. It was far away from the glass, walled offices where people like Daniel West touched base and circled back. Here, reality existed. Here, things either worked or they didn't. There were no visions, only verifiable facts. I sat down in my ergonomic chair, the one I paid for myself because the company issued ones were designed to slowly dismantle the human spine, and placed my hands flat on the desk. My breathing was shallow. My heart was hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. But my mind, the part of me Daniel had called obstructionist, was cooling down, freezing over into a block of absolute, terrifying clarity. Daniel had insulted my attitude. I was about to show him exactly what my attitude was worth. I opened my drawer. It was organized with a precision that would make a surgeon weep. Post-it notes color, coded by urgency. AUTA, a spreadsheet of filing deadlines that I maintained manually because the automated system was prone to glitching. And there, in the back, tucked inside a plain manila folder labeled Miscellaneous Legacy, was the file. I didn't open it immediately. I just rested my finger on the tab. Let me explain something about patent law. It is incredibly, soul-crushingly boring. Bada. It is a world of minutiae, of semicolons that change the fate of millions of dollars, of filing dates stamped to the millisecond. It is a world where close enough is legally synonymous with complete failure. Men like Daniel think big. They think in broad strokes. They think the details will sort themselves out. They think that because they are the director of innovation, the universe will bend to their will. But the universe doesn't care about your job title. The universe cares about paperwork. I pulled up the digital record for patent number 40-312 on my dual monitors. The system lagged. Boda, the spinning wheel of death mocking me for a moment before the file popped up. Title: Adaptive Neural Network Optimization for High-Load Logistics. Inventor Mike Jensen. Status: pending. There it was. The word that was going to cost them everything. Pending. I closed my eyes and let the memory wash over me. It was 4 years ago. Boda. I was going through my divorce. My ex-wife, a woman who thought fidelity was a suggestion rather than a vow, had left me with a mountain of debt and a house I couldn't afford. I threw myself into work to keep from drowning, using the predictable structure of compliance to impose order on a chaotic, painful life. I spent nights, weekends, bada, and holidays in this office. The company was struggling then. They needed a fix for the latency issues in their core artificial intelligence model. The engineering team was stumped. The visionaries were panicked. So, I did what I do. I fixed it. I wasn't an engineer by trade, but I knew the logic. I knew the compliance structures. I wrote the algorithm myself at 3 o'clock in the morning on a Saturday, Boda, fueled by stale vending machine coffee and the kind of insomnia that comes from staring at an empty side of the bed. I filed the provisional patent application myself. I listed myself as the inventor because, technically, I was. The standard procedure was for legal to send me an a Sussex assignment of rights's form within 3 months. I would sign it, transferring ownership to the company in exchange for, usually, nothing. Maybe a generic thank you card and a $25 gift card to a chain restaurant. But 4 years ago, the legal department was in chaos. The old general counsel had been fired for embezzlement. Files were lost. Emails were deleted. Boda. The assignment of rights form for patent number 40-312 never came. I remembered waiting for it. I remembered checking my inbox every day for 2 weeks. And then I remembered the day I stopped checking. I remembered thinking, it's their job to secure their assets. I'm just the compliance guy. If they had treated me well, if they had given me the respect, the pay, the acknowledgement I deserved, I would have walked into Robert's office years ago and said, hey, We missed a signature here. I would have fixed it, because that's what I did. I fixed things. But today, Boda, today Daniel had stood in front of the entire leadership team and told me wasn't a team player. He had taken food off my table. He had mocked my dedication. I looked at the screen. The patent had been granted 2 years ago. But without that assignment form, the rights remained with the inventor. With me, I own the algorithm. I own the code that ran the Gemini X module. Boda. I own the engine of the rocket ship Daniel was so proud of piloting. My internal conflict? The fear of vulnerability and the impulse to retreat was now replaced by the chilling confidence of absolute leverage. The fear was gone, replaced by a terrible, calculated focus. I reached for my phone. I didn't call a lawyer. Not yet. First, I needed to lock the door from the outside. I opened a new email draft. Subject clarification of IP status. Boda. I needed to trigger the collapse without leaving my fingerprints on the detonator. I typed in the email address of Sarah Cooper, the chief compliance officer at Titan Corp, our $400 million partner. We had met at a few dull conferences over the years. We had bonded over our shared hatred of buzzwords and our love for perfectly organized spreadsheets. I typed slowly, my fingers dancing over the keys. Hi, Sarah. Just doing some routine housekeeping on our end before the big merger. Can you confirm what documentation you have on file regarding the chain of title for the 4312 patent family? Our new director seems to think everything is automated, but you know how I worry about the details. Best, Mike. It was innocent. It was helpful. It was the kind of email a diligent, boring compliance specialist sends. But to a woman like Sarah, it was a fire alarm. It was a subtle, coded message that said, check your records. Something is catastrophically wrong. I hit send. I minimized the email window, opened my spreadsheet of daily tasks, and went back to work. I had audits to file. I had compliance checks to run. I was going to be the perfect employee. I was going to be exactly what Daniel wanted: quiet, invisible, and efficient. While I worked, I imagined the email traveling through the fiber optic cables, bouncing off satellites, landing in a server in Chicago. I imagined the invisible thread tightening around Daniel's neck. He wanted a paradigm shift. I was about to give him one. At noon, while the rest of the office filtered out to grab overpriced salads or hit the gym to burn off their corporate angst, I stayed at my desk. I unwrapped a turkey sandwich I'd brought from home, dry bread, efficient protein, and dialed a number I hadn't called in 6 months. Boda. It was the United States Patent and Trademark Office General line, but I knew the trick to routing it. This is Arthur. A gravelly voice answered. Arthur was 70 years old, a retired patent examiner who now worked as a consultant for people who could afford his hourly rate. Or, in my case, for people who brought him homemade scotchras every Christmas for a decade. He was the oracle of intellectual property law. He knew the code better than the people who wrote it. Arthur, it's Mike. Mike, to what do I owe the pleasure? Finally quitting that circus to come work for the firm, he wheezed. Not yet, Arthur. I have a hypothetical for you. I love hypotheticals. Usually means someone screwed up. Lay it on me. Let's say. I began, meticulously laying out the facts. Or an employee creates a patentable asset during non-work hours on their own dime and files it personally. Sabota. Let's say the company lists the asset in a commercial contract, but never executes a formal assignment of rights. And let's say the employee contract at the time had a sunset clause on intellectual property claims that expired 2 years ago due to a merger restructuring. There was a long silence on the line. I could hear Arthur taking a drag of a cigarette. He was one of the few people left who smoked indoors. Probable fines be damned. The silence was not confusion, it was calculation. The 2018 merger? Arthur asked. The one where they dissolved the LLC and reformed as a CC corporation. That's the one. Mike. He wheezed, a sound that was half laugh, half cough. If they didn't get that assignment, signed before the entity dissolution, that intellectual property doesn't belong to the new CC corporation. It belongs to the phantom of the old LLC. And since the LLC is dead, it defaults to the creator. Eyes it watertight? I asked, staring at a stain on my cubicle wall that I had always meant to clean. Watertight. It's a bank vault, kid. Without that signature, they are selling a car they don't have the title to, Boda. If they try to execute a deal based on that intellectual property, it's fraud. Straight up. Why do you ask? Just checking the tire pressure, I said, using Daniel's earlier mocking words. Thanks. Arthur, give them hell, Mike. I hung up. Confirmation. The weapon was loaded and verified. My fear of confrontation was completely replaced by a ruthless, controlled excitement. 10 minutes later, my desk phone blinked. It was Sarah Cooper from Titan Corp. I put on my headset and adjusted my voice. I needed to sound helpful, slightly confused, and utterly non-threatening. Mike, hey, I got your email, Sarah said. She sounded tense, which was good. Tension meant action. Good. I'm looking at the diligence data room right now, I said, typing loudly on my keyboard to simulate casual business. Daniel is our new innovation guy, very high energy. He mentioned that the Gemini X roll out is totally dependent on 4312. Bada. I just wanted to make sure the cross-reference numbers matched your records. Our legal drive is a bit of a mess since the migration. Mike, I'm looking at the file. Sarah said slowly, every word carrying weight. I see the patent grant. I see the technical specs. But the chain of title folder is empty. Oh, I said, feigning surprise. That's odd. Maybe it was misfiled. I'm checking the Patent and Trademark Office public database right now. Sarah's typing was frantic, like machine. Gunfire. It lists the owner as you, Mike Jensen, individually. I feigned shock. Well, that was the original filing, Bada, but surely there's an assignment document. I mean, we're about to sign a $400 million deal. Legal wouldn't have missed that. Mike. Sarah's voice dropped, ice cold. If there's no assignment, Titan Corp can't touch this, Boda. Our risk compliance protocol strictly forbids integrating third-party intellectual property without full indemnification and ownership transfer. If this tech belongs to an individual, my God, does your director know, Daniel? Oh, he's very confident. I offered blandly. He told me explicitly today not to worry about the details. He said the intellectual property is locked down. A's lying. Sarah said flatly. Or he's an idiot? Has very visionary, I countered. I need to flag this, Sarah said. I have to put a hold on the payment schedule until this is cleared up. Mike, if this isn't resolved, the board is going to fleece us alive for due diligence failure. I understand, Sarah. You have to do your job just like I have to do mine, I replied. I'm sending a formal request for information to your general counsel, and I'm copying your CDO. Sounds like the right move. Good luck, Mike. I hung up the phone. I took a sip of my lukewarm water. The fuse was lit. It would take a few hours for the request for information to work its way through the bureaucratic digestive system of our company. Legal would get it, panic, and start searching. They wouldn't find anything. Then they would call Daniel. I checked the time. 1:15 in the afternoon. I opened my email and drafted a request for a personal day for tomorrow. Reason: mental health and stress management. I wouldn't be here when the bomb went off. I wanted them to sit in the rubble alone. I spent the rest of the afternoon doing exactly what I was paid to do. I organized files. I updated compliance logs. I was a ghost haunting a machine I had already sabotaged. Around 3 o'clock, I saw Daniel strutting past my aisle. He was laughing into his headset, probably talking to a recruiter about how awesome he was. He didn't even look at me. To him, I was furniture, Boda. He had no idea that the furniture had just canceled his golden parachute. I packed my bag at 5 o'clock sharp. I took my personal notebook. I took my favorite pen. I left the company laptop on the desk, a useless husk now that its engine was out of their control. Good night, Mike, the security guard, Dave, said as I swiped my badge at the exit turnstile. You too, Dave, I said, offering a genuine smile. Good night, Dave, I said, offering a genuine smile. I think it's going to be a quiet night. Hope so, he replied. It wouldn't be. By tomorrow morning, this building would be a war zone, and I would be sitting at home in my pajamas, watching the fire from a safe distance. I was finally shedding the anxiety that came from 12 years of feeling undervalued and disposable. I was embracing the cold, calculated high of self-assertion. I woke up at 7 o'clock the next morning, naturally, without an alarm. The sun was actually shining for once, filtering through the blinds of my condo. It was quiet. No buzzing fluorescent lights. No chatter about quarterly deliverables. I made coffee, good coffee, French press, not the sludge from the break room urn. I sat on my balcony, wrapped in a blanket, watching the city wake up. My phone was on the kitchen counter, face down. Boda. I had put it on Do Not Disturb for everyone except my immediate family, a line of defense against the expected barrage. But I could feel it vibrating. Not a constant buzz, but the rhythmic, desperate pulse of a device receiving too many notifications at once. I took a sip of coffee. Dark roast. Hints of cherry and chocolate. Delicious. Back at the office right about now. The 8:30 stand-up huddle would be starting. Daniel loved stand-ups. He made everyone stand in a circle and catch a foam football while stating their power goal for the day. It was infantilizing and humiliating. I imagined the scene, Daniel throwing the ball. My power goal is to finalize the Titan Corp signature. Twack. He catches the ball. He grins, looking around for applause. And then, the interruption. The first email, the first frantic call, landing in Robert Hayes's inbox. I walked into the kitchen and flipped my phone over. The screen was a wall of notifications. 5 missed calls from Robert, the CEO. 3 missed calls from Human Resources. 12 emails marked urgent and high priority. A text from Janice in accounting, girl, what is happening? Legal is running around like their hair is on fire. A text from Dave Security, Mr. West is yelling at the printer. Just thought you should know. I smiled. The request for information from Sarah Cooper must have hit the general counsel's inbox late last night or early this morning. I opened the first email from Robert Hayes. Subject, urgent IP documentation 40-312. Mike, we have a query from Titan Corp regarding the assignment of the Gemini module patent. They claim the file is incomplete. I need you to pull the physical file and bring it to my office immediately. This is top priority. Sent at 8:15 in the morning. I scrolled up. A second email from Robert. Subject, where are you? Mike, you are not at your desk. I do not care about your personal day. We have a crisis. Get in here now. Sent at 8:45 in the morning. And then a text from Daniel West. Just one. Call me? No. Please. No explanation. Just a command. I put the phone back down. I wasn't going to call. Not yet. The high of controlling the chaos was too sweet to interrupt. I imagined the frantic search. The paralegals tearing through the filing cabinets. Information technology guys searching the server logs. They would find the patent filing. They would find my name. And then they would look for the transfer document. They would look in the digital archive file, not found. BOTA. They would look in the physical Iron Mountain boxes, file not found. They would check the old merger documents, clause invalid. By 10 o'clock, the realization would be setting in. It wouldn't be panic yet. It would be confusion. Surely it's just misplaced. They would say, surely we didn't build a $400 million strategy on code we don't own. I decided to do some gardening. I have a small collection of succulents. They require very little attention, but when they thrive, they are beautiful. Kind of like the patent law they were currently ignoring. I watered them carefully. At 11:30 in the morning, my phone rang again. This time, it wasn't the office line. It was a courier service. Hello, Mr. Jensen. Speaking. I have a priority package for you from Titan Corp Legal. Requires a signature. Are you at your listed home address? I am. Be there in 10 minutes. Sarah Cooper was fast. She wasn't just flagging the risk. She was locking the gate. She was protecting her company from the fraud my former employers were attempting to commit. When the courier arrived, he handed me a thick envelope. I signed for it. I opened it on my kitchen island. It wasn't a lawsuit against the company. It was a notice of contractual suspension. Dear Mr. Jensen, pursuant to our due diligence audit regarding the pending partnership between Titan Corp and your company, we have identified you as the sole legal owner of patent number 4312. As we have no record of a licensing agreement between yourself and your company, AUDA, we are hereby notifying you that all integration of the Gemini X module involving your intellectual property has been halted effective immediately. We are prepared to open a direct dialogue regarding licensing should you wish to negotiate independently of your company. Sincerely, Titan Corp Legal Department. I laughed. A genuine belly laugh that started deep in my chest. They had bypassed the company entirely. Titan Corp knew a sinking ship when they saw one. They were reaching out to the captain of the lifeboat. This was the moment of ultimate leverage. The power dynamic wasn't just flipped, it was inverted. My phone buzzed again. A voicemail from Robert. I decided to listen to this one. Mike. His voice was tight, high-pitched. Mike, pick up the phone. Titan Corp just froze the accounts. They sent a formal cease and desist to us claiming you own the tech. What the hell is going on? Daniel is saying you sabotaged the database. I need you here to explain this, now. Sabotage. Of course, Daniel would call it that. He couldn't conceive of a world where his failure was his own fault. I poured myself another cup of coffee. I sat down at my personal laptop, my customized, secure, non-comp machine. I drafted a reply to Sarah at Titan Corp. Received. I am open to a conversation, but first I need to resolve some internal matters with my current employer. Please keep the freeze in place until further notice. Then, I finally replied to Robert. A text message short, precise. I am on a scheduled personal day. I will be in tomorrow at 9 o'clock in the morning. If you would like to discuss the acquisition of my personal, intellectual property, please have a meeting room prepared, and I suggest you have legal counsel present. You're going to need them? I hit send. The turning of the key was complete. The door was locked, and I was the only one with the way out. When I walked into the lobby the next morning, the silence was heavy enough to bruise. Usually, there's a hum. Phones ringing, people chatting about sports, the clatter of the espresso machine. Today, it was like walking into a wake. The receptionist, a sweet girl named Kelly, who usually wore our bright scarves, looked pale. She saw me walk in and immediately picked up her phone, whispering something urgent. I swiped my badge. A beeped, still active. Good. They weren't stupid enough to lock me out. Not yet. I took the elevator to the 4th floor, the executive suite. As the doors opened, I saw them. A cluster of people in suits standing in the hallway, looking at tablets and shouting in hushed, aggressive whispers. Daniel West was there. He looked terrible. His tie was loosened, his top button undone. He had dark circles under his eyes that no amount of LinkedIn filtering could hide. He was pacing back and forth, gesturing wildly to the general counsel, a man named Henderson, who looked like he wanted to dissolve into the carpet. It's a glitch, Daniel was saying, his voice cracking. It's a clerical error. He's a compliance specialist, not an engineer! He didn't invent anything, just filed the paperwork. The paperwork says he's the inventor, Daniel. Henderson snapped back. And the paperwork says we don't own it. Titan Corp isn't freezing payments because of a glitch. They're freezing them because we're trying to sell them stolen goods. It's not stolen! It's company property! He worked here when he made it. Did you sign the assignment form? Henderson yelled. Did you check the file? That's his job! Daniel screamed. He's the compliance officer! It's entrapment! He set me up. I stepped out of the elevator. The sound of my heels on the marble floor cut through their argument. Click, Click. They all turned. Daniel's eyes went wide. For a second, I thought he was going to lunge at me, fueled by his desperate, public failure. But then he saw the look on my face. I wasn't smiling. I wasn't scowling. I was completely, utterly blank. It was the face of the auditor, the face of the tax collector, the face of the inevitable. The control I had established yesterday had moved from abstract leverage to a physical, chilling presence. Robert Hayes said, stepping out of his office. He looked 10 years older than he had on Tuesday. In my office now. Good morning. Robert, I said pleasantly. Is there coffee? I haven't had my second cup yet. This isn't a social call. Daniel spat, stepping toward me. You think this is funny? You think you can hold the company hostage because of some filing error? I stopped and looked at him. I didn't raise my voice. I lowered it, forcing him to strain to hear me. It's not a filing error, Daniel. It's the law. Remember details. You told me to park them in the lot. Well, the lot is full, and you're being towed. Daniel's mouth opened and closed like a fish on a dock. I walked past him and into the boardroom, the same room where 2 days ago he had stripped me of my bonus. Robert followed me in. Henderson, the general counsel, followed. Daniel scrambled in last, looking like a cornered rat. We sat down. The dynamic had shifted physically. I sat at the head of the table. I didn't ask permission. I just took the seat. Robert hesitated, then sat to my right. Daniel sat opposite me, vibrating with rage and fear. Titan Corp has frozen the $40 million initial tranche. Robert said, his voice shaking. They are threatening to pull the contract entirely and sue for breach of good faith. Our stock is down 12% in pre-market trading. He looked at me, a desperate plea in his eyes. Mike, tell us how to fix this. Fix it, I asked. I tried to fix it on Tuesday. I told you the assignment chain wasn't clean. You told me I had a bad attitude. We're past that? Henderson interrupted. Mike, let's be reasonable. We know you filed the patent, but you did it while employed by the company. Implied ownership statutes. Don't quote statutes at me. Henderson, I cut him off, the years of repressed frustration lending my voice an unusual authority. I know the law better than you do. That's why you pay me, or used to pay me, to handle compliance. The work was done outside of business hours. The filing was done personally. The company had 90 days to execute the assignment of rights. You didn't. The company then dissolved and reformed, BODA. The rights didn't transfer because they weren't listed in the assets of the LLC. They defaulted to the inventor. I pulled a folder from my bag. I slid a single piece of paper across the table. BODA. It was a notarized affidavit from the Patent and Trademark Office confirming my sole ownership. Patent number 40-312 is mine, I said. And since Gemini X cannot function without 40-312, Gemini X is effectively mine too. This is extortion, Daniel hissed. You can't do this? I'm not doing anything, I said. I'm just sitting here. You're the ones who sold a product you didn't own. That's fraud, Daniel. Federal fraud. Do you know what the penalty is for defrauding a partner in a merger involving publicly traded funds? It involves prison time, not the nice kind of prison with tennis courts. Daniel went pale. The blood drained from his face so fast, it looked like a magic trick. What do you want? Robert asked. He sounded utterly defeated. He knew I had them. I want to negotiate, I said, but not for a raise, and certainly not for a bonus. I leaned forward slightly. I want to discuss the terms of your surrender. The room was silent. Outside the glass walls, the office was paralyzed. But inside, the temperature had dropped to absolute zero. We can fire you, Daniel blurted out. Gross misconduct. Insubordination. Go ahead, I said. Fire me. My emotional arc was completely full confrontation, no retreat. Then I walk out that door, call Sarah Cooper at Titan Corp, and sell them the exclusive license to 4312 directly. They'll cut you out of the deal entirely. You'll lose the $400 million. You'll be sued by your shareholders. And you? I pointed a manicured finger at Daniel. Will be unhireable in this industry for the rest of your life. Daniel slumped back in his chair. So, I said, opening my notebook. Let's talk numbers. Robert was the first to speak. He rubbed his temples, a gesture of a man whose headache was rapidly evolving into a migraine. Okay. Mike, you've made your point. You have the leverage. We need the rights to 4312 assigned to the company to unlock the Titan Corp deal. What is the price? It's not a flat fee, I said calmly. We're discussing a licensing agreement. Licensing. Henderson squeaked. Mike, we need a full buyout. Titan Corp wants clear title. Titan Corp wants the tech to work legally. I corrected. They don't care if you own it or license it, as long as the chain is valid. I am willing to grant an exclusive perpetual license to the company for the use of patent number 4312 in the Gemini X module, but I retain the underlying intellectual property. That's highly irregular for an employee, Henderson muttered. So, is publicly canceling a senior specialist's bonus because he pointed out a legal risk? I countered. But here we are. I looked at my notes. Here are the terms. First, BODA, a retroactive royalty fee for the use of my intellectual property over the last 2 years based on the revenue generated by the beta modules. That comes to, let's call it, $200,000. Daniel choked on air. 200 grand! You're out of your mind. That's the friends and family discount, I said. If I take it to market, the valuation is higher. Second, forward royalty of 2% on all gross revenue generated by the Gemini X line. 2% of gross! Robert stood up. Mike, that's millions of dollars over the life of the contract. We can't give an employee points on the package. Then don't, I said, closing my notebook. I'm happy to sell it to Titan Corp. They offered me a very generous consulting package this morning. I made to stand up. Sit down, Robert yelled. Then, softer, please. Sit down, I sat. Third, I continued as if nothing had happened. I want a formal written apology, signed by both of you. BODA. Acknowledging that the delay in the deal was due to executive oversight and failure to heed compliance warnings. This will be filed with Human Resources and sent to the Board of Directors. I am not signing that, Daniel said, his face turning red again. That's an admission of incompetence. Yes, I said. It is. I won't do it. It'll kill my career. Your career is already on life support, Daniel. I am just deciding whether or not to pull the plug. I turn to Robert. If he doesn't sign, no deal. The intellectual property stays with me. The Titan deal dies. You explain to the shareholders why you lost $400 million to save the ego of a man who has been here for 90 days. Robert looked at Daniel. The look wasn't friendly. It was the look of a man doing the math and realizing one variable was expendable. Hail sign, Robert said. Robert. Daniel gasped. Shut up, Daniel. Robert said, finally finding some spine. You caused this. You fix it. You sign the paper. And finally, I said, getting to the part I enjoyed the most. I want my title changed. I am no longer a senior specialist. I want to be named external consultant regarding intellectual property strategy. I paused, letting the scope of the demand sink in. I will work remotely. I will set my own hours. And I will report directly to the board, not to the director of innovation. You want to be a consultant? Henderson asked, utterly perplexed. While still employed. No, I said. I'm resigning today. The license agreement will be between the company and my new LLC, Jensen Intellectual Property Solutions. It will be my first client. The retainer will be equal to my current salary, plus the royalties. The room was silent again. They were processing it. I was quitting, but they couldn't get rid of me. Bada. I was firing them as bosses and rehiring them as customers. It was the ultimate assertion of worth, turning my expertise into an indispensable, profitable entity that functioned entirely outside their direct control. The emotional satisfaction was immense, far deeper than any raise could have provided. If we agree to this? Henderson said, slowly, desperation masking his legal prudence. You sign the license immediately. We can send it to Titan Corp by noon. The moment the wire transfer for the back pay hits my account and the apology is signed, I said. Wes. Robert slumped in his chair. He looked at the whiteboard where Daniel's growth strategy was still drawn in red marker. It looked childish now, a relic of failed hubris. Do it, Robert whispered, waving his hand in a gesture of absolute defeat. Draw up the papers, Henderson, but Robert. Daniel started, his voice a pathetic squeak. I said, do it. Robert slammed his hand on the table, the first decisive action he'd taken all week. And Daniel, get out of my sight. Daniel stood up. He looked at me. There was hatred in his eyes, but underneath it, there was a terrible, deep-seated fear. He knew he had lost everything. He picked up his notepad and walked out of the room. He didn't strut this time. He shuffled. I stayed seated. I'll wait here while you draft the agreement, I said to Henderson. And make sure you use the standard template. I'd hate to have to correct your work again. Henderson nodded grimly, looking like he wanted to vomit. I poured myself a glass of water from the picture on the table. It was cool and refreshing. They begged. They folded, and I hadn't even raised my voice. It took legal 3 hours to draft the contracts. Boda. I spent that time in the break room eating a bagel and watching the news on my phone. People walked by, glancing at me with wide eyes. The rumor mill was churning at breakneck speed. Mike sued the company. Mike is the new CEO. Mike is actually a spy for Titan Corp. The truth was more boring and far more lucrative. When Henderson brought the papers back, they were thick, 30 pages of legalese designed to cover their backsides while officially admitting defeat. I read every single word. I sat in the conference room, pen in hand, correcting typos and clarifying ambiguities. This indemnification clause is too broad, I said, scratching out a paragraph. Limit it to the scope of the 312 patent family. Henderson sighed and made a note, BOTA. But the most important part, the part they glossed over because they were so focused on the money, was Oz Clause 14, Section BC. Right of technical integrity. It sounded harmless, just standard boilerplate about maintaining the quality of the licensed product, BOTA. But I had worded it very carefully. The licensor, me, retains the right to audit the implementation of the licensed technology, patent number 312, to ensure it operates within the specified parameters. Any modification, alteration, or optimization of the underlying algorithm by the licensee, the company, requires written approval from the licensor to prevent degradation of the asset. In plain English, it meant they couldn't touch my code. BOTA. Daniel's entire plan for scaling the Gemini X module involved tweaking the algorithm to run faster on cheaper hardware. Sabota. It was a stupid idea that would destabilize the whole system, but it would save them money in the short term. It was classic innovation director thinking break the product, fix the margin. With Clause 14b, he couldn't do it. BOTA. If he tried to tweak the code, I could pull the license for breach of technical integrity. I was effectively locking the hood of the car. They could drive it, but they couldn't mess with the engine. The engine, the heart of their $400 million deal, was now protected by me. Is this clause standard? Robert asked, squinting at the page. It's standard for high-value artificial intelligence licensing. I lied smoothly. Titan Corp will expect it. They don't want you breaking the engine and blaming the vendor. Fine, Robert said. His patience evaporated. Just sign it. I signed. Mike Jensen, President, Jensen Intellectual Property Solutions. It felt good on paper. Then I slid the apology letter across the table. Sign, I said. Robert signed it quickly, like he was signing a speeding ticket. Daniel is in his office, Robert said, looking miserable. You want me to bring him in? No, I said. I'll go to him. I took the paper and walked down the hall to Daniel's office. The door was closed. I didn't knock. I pushed it open. Daniel was on the phone, his back to the door. No, bro. It's just a minor hiccup. We're still crushing it. Yeah. I'm handling it. He spun around when he heard the door. He hung up the phone instantly. Sign this, I said, dropping the paper on his desk. He looked at it. I, Daniel West, acknowledge that the failure to secure intellectual property rights. He looked up, his face a roadmap of humiliation. I can't believe you're doing this. You're ruining the team dynamic. There is no team, Daniel. There are just the people who do the work and the people who take credit for it. Today, the bill came due. He picked up a pen. His hand was trembling. He signed it. It was a messy scroll. Thank you, I said, taking the paper back. Are you happy? He asked, his voice raw. You got your money, You got your win. Are you happy? I looked at him. I thought about the years of missed holidays. I thought about the growth mindset lectures. I thought about the yoga retreat his wife was probably booking right now with his non-existent bonus. I am not happy, Daniel, I said. I am compliant. It means the system works, the rules were enforced, and I am the one controlling the outcome. And right now, that feels like the same thing. I walked out. I stopped by payroll on the way out. My wire transfer processed. I asked Janice. Hit your account 2 minutes ago. She whispered, giving me a massive thumbs up. Thanks, Janice. I walked back to my desk. I picked up my bag. I picked up my succulent. I left the company laptop. I left the ID badge on the keyboard. I walked to the elevator. The doors opened. I stepped inside. As the doors closed, I saw the office one last time. The gray carpet, the buzzing lights, the cage where I had spent 12 years. I wasn't a prisoner anymore. I was the warden. The air outside the building tasted different. It was still Minneapolis air, cold, crisp, smelling faintly of exhaust, but it felt lighter, cleaner. I walked to my car, a sensible sedan that was fully paid off, and sat in the driver's seat for a long time. I checked my bank account on my phone. The number was long, comically long. The back pay, plus the first royalty advance, was more money than I had made in the last 5 years combined. I drove home. I didn't blast music. I didn't scream. I listened to a podcast about architectural history. It was soothing, oughta, and the quiet ritual of it reaffirmed the control I had just asserted over my life. The next few weeks were a blur of quiet victory. I set up Jensen Intellectual Property Solutions in my spare bedroom. It took me about an hour. I bought a new chair, a really expensive one, a Boda, an ergonomic fortress. I bought a coffee machine that cost more than my first car, Boda. The gossip from the office reached me through Janice in accounting and Dave, the security guard. Daniel is on a rampage. Janice texted me 3 days later. He tried to push a code update to the Gemini module. It told him they needed your written permission. He literally threw a stapler. I smiled. Clause 14b in action. A Boda, I had protected my code, and in doing so, I had protected the entire deal from Daniel's destructive vision. Robert is making him undergo leadership retraining. Another text said, which basically means he has to sit in human resources seminars all day. He looks like a deflated balloon. And then the Titan Corp news broke. Titan Corp announced the official launch of the Gemini X partnership. In the press release, there was a quote from Sarah Cooper, the compliance chief. We are thrilled to partner with company name and to leverage the robust Aboda, independently verified architecture provided by Jensen Intellectual Property Solutions. Security and integrity are our top priorities. She had name-dropped me. She had publicly validated that I was the guarantee of quality, not the company. My phone started ringing, not from Robert, but from other firms, headhunters, legal departments at other tech giants. They saw the press release. They looked up the patent. Saboda. They realized that there was a freelance compliance wizard who had brought a $400 million deal to its knees and walked away with the keys. We need someone to audit our intellectual property portfolio. One vice president from a biotech firm told me, we don't want a Mike Jensen incident on our hands. I'm quite expensive. We expect you to be, he replied. I took the job. I was working less, earning triple, and I never had to sit in a synergy huddle again. The emotional shift was complete. The need for external validation was replaced by the reality of my indispensable worth. But the best part wasn't the money. It was the email I received from Daniel West about a month after I left. Subject request for variance. Mike, Boda, you need to adjust the latency parameters on the 40.3.12 algorithm to accommodate the new server load. Please sign the attached waiver to allow us to modify the code. Daniel, he had to ask. He had to beg permission to do his job. I waited 24 hours to reply. Dear Daniel, I have reviewed your request. Based on my analysis, modifying the latency parameters introduces a 0.4% risk of data corruption. This falls outside the acceptable quality threshold defined in Clause 14b, request denied. Best, Mike Jensen, President. I imagined him reading it. I imagined the vein popping in his forehead. I took a sip of my expensive coffee. Compliance isn't the enemy, Daniel. Arrogance is. And I was the auditor sent to collect the debt. Boda, the Midwest Tech Summit is the kind of event where everyone wears lanyards that cost more than a Honda Civic and drinks champagne that tastes like apples. It was held in Chicago this year. I wasn't there as an employee. I was there as a speaker. My panel was titled, The Invisible Asset: Why Intellectual Property Compliance is Your Most Dangerous Liability. The room had been packed. After the panel, I walked through the mixer in the main ballroom. I was wearing a new suit, navy blue, tailored, sharp as a knife. I held a glass of sparkling water. I saw them near the buffet, Robert and Daniel. They looked diminished. Robert looked tired. His shoulders slumped. Daniel looked desperate. He was scanning the room, eyes darting around, looking for someone important to talk to. He spotted Sarah Cooper from Titan Corp. She was standing with a group of investors, laughing. Daniel straightened his tie. He tapped Robert on the shoulder. They started moving toward her. They were going to try to network. They were going to try to pretend everything was great. I moved to intercept. I didn't rush. I just glided. Sarah. I called out. My voice was warm and projecting perfectly over the crowd. Sarah turned. Her face lit up. Mike! Oh my God, that panel was amazing. The way you described the zombie LLC loophole. Genius. She stepped away from the investors and hugged me. Daniel and Robert froze mid-step. They were 10 feet away. Close enough to be seen. Too far to be included. Mike. Robert said, nodding stiffly. Good to see you. Daniel didn't say anything. He just stared at my badge. Mike Jensen, President, Jensen Intellectual Property. Hello? Robert, I said. How is the latency project going? Still struggling with those parameters. Daniel flushed a deep, ugly purple. We are managing, he muttered. We've actually updated our vendor policy, Sarah said, looking coldly at Robert. Going forward, any intellectual property integration for the Gemini project goes through Mike's firm first for validation. We don't trust your internal audit team anymore. No offense. None taken, I said cheerfully. That's going to add weeks to the timeline, Daniel protested, his voice desperate. Then you better start filing your requests earlier, I said. And Daniel, make sure you use the correct form this time. I rejected the last one because you used the deprecated template. The investors around Sarah were watching. Bada. They were sensing the power dynamic. They saw the tired CEO, the sweaty director, and the man standing between them and the money. We should go, Robert said, grabbing Daniel's elbow. We have a dinner reservation. Enjoy, I said. Don't forget to get a receipt. Compliance is strict these days. They walked away. They didn't look back. They looked like two men who had been mugged without ever seeing a weapon. Sarah turned back to me. You are absolutely ruthless, she said, grinning. I'm just thorough, I replied. I took a sip of my water. The room buzzed around me. I checked my phone. A notification from my bank. The quarterly royalty payment had just cleared. I looked at the number. It was enough to retire. It was enough to buy a house in Italy. It was enough to do whatever I wanted. But I wasn't going to retire. I was having too much fun. I walked out of the ballroom into the cool Chicago night. I hailed a cab. Where to? The driver asked. The airport, I said. I have a consultation in New York tomorrow. Someone forgot to sign a waiver. I leaned back in the seat and watched the city lights blur past. Daniel was right about one thing. Bada. It was a paradigm shift. He just didn't realize he was the one being shifted.